All right, Jack, my man. Glad to,
Hey,
excited to dive in with you. Um,
right.
why don't we kick it off just to set the table here? You're working at Scale Labs. I sort of think of Scale Labs as you gave this analogy once on some other talk or piece you wrote, which I really liked, which is like it's a side highway to Ethereum. Ethereum's the main highway. It's got 5 lanes, a million cars trying to go through, and then you guys are a side highway. You could say side chain, but you help people go in and out of that main Ethereum pipeline, similar to Polkadot or Polygon in a sense. How do you sort of see the difference with the strategic product direction that Scale Labs and Scale Network is trying to carve out with respect to some of the other big projects in the space?
Yeah, you know what? I think, and hey, I like using that analogy because it makes a lot more sense to more people than getting into like the nitty gritty details of, servers and nodes and consensus mechanisms. And so to your point, Scale, it's like, let's say we're, in LA and there's this huge highway, huge interstate, and it's just jammed with cars. Very clear you're going to get from point A to point B, but it's not fast, it's not agile, and there's a huge toll to pay to use it. So you could think of that's essentially Ethereum in this analogy, but then you have this private lane on Scale that every application gets their private lane and the cars can just fly down that highway 100 miles an hour. But it's not a disconnected highway. It can move back and forth to the big highway, which is really what you need if you're trying to still get off, at a certain exit, right?
Yeah, it's really like it's like the boring tunnel. That'd be a good one. Elon's project. Yeah, it's an underground tunnel.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Scale does. And the thing about blockchains, people are like, well, why are they so slow and expensive? Well, the reason why is the more and more computers that participate with that blockchain, the more secure they are. But when they all have to talk and carry the same state, what that essentially means in non-technical terms is each of those computers is really kind of replicating the same information. And so it's like if you had 100 people and you played the game of telephone and everybody, you tested it, everyone say the same thing. And if there's 100 people and they all said the same thing, well, that thing is probably true. But if there's like 10 people, the odds of them, it's going to be a lot faster for them to get on the same page. But, a lot less, guarantee when only, 2/3 of 10 people are saying something than 2/3 of 100 or 10,000. Mm-hmm. And so blockchains really, they're diametrically opposed. Security and speed and usability are kind of diametrically opposed. And so Scale is taking an approach to say, hey, we have some mechanism design that allows for a lot of speed and agility while not losing security. And really it's like, it's a matter of still having a big pool of these computers that are talking to each other, but only a subset of them are ever kind of functioning together at any time. And they're also kind of like rotating and intermingling and mixing, and they're randomly assigned together. And so basically you get this pooled security with having like speed and agility of small groups. Mm. And then the strategy of Scale is to take those small groups and connect to Ethereum, because that's where people are building applications. And Ethereum actually also helps Scale function as well. It gives security to the Scale network. So we're very different. Scale is very different because it's really taking an Ethereum first approach, and it's using Ethereum to then create more agile in the prior analogy lanes.
Yeah. Do you view Ethereum at this point as having sort of the major like layer one protocol that you chose to build on Ethereum? You're not on top of other protocols. Is Scale? No,
yeah,
right?
No,
yeah.
Scale is fully built on Ethereum and connected to Ethereum, and it is a blockchain network in itself, but it has connected integration and interoperability with Ethereum. So if you ask that question to mass blockchain audience, people will say, "Oh no, there's this huge battle of layer ones," and the reality is that the market for an appetite for people speculating and buying tokens is so high that there's a lot of really successful layer ones. But when you go and you look at like developers who are building, the vast majority of them are building on Ethereum. And you're also seeing Ethereum grow and proliferate in an interesting way. in that the ecosystem is growing outside of Ethereum itself. So Ethereum virtual machine actually lives on all these other blockchains now. So people, if they can't beat them, they're joining them, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's fascinating. So does that certainly makes the whole ecosystem more interwoven, but would you say it makes the other chains more valuable or more likely to be used if they're...
Yeah, the good news is if you're trying to compete against Ethereum by saying, hey, we've got a better language to write smart contracts, but everybody's using Solidity, which is Ethereum's smart contract language, then, and all the wallets and the tools and, the products in the ecosystem, if they're all using Ethereum virtual machine and you're not, well, you're going to have zero utility. So other blockchains now are kind of porting over, and it actually brings up a new word. It's like whether or not, so something could be Ethereum interoperable, but it doesn't mean it's Ethereum native. And Scale is Ethereum native in the sense that actually the Scale network functions by being actually on Ethereum. It's connected. So like this brain and orchestration mechanism for Scale lives on Ethereum. And so you end up always having to pay Ethereum as a developer or someone staking or for all these other functions to use Scale. So it's not like these other chains, a lot of them they have Ethereum interoperability, but they're parasitic. All they do is kind of suck value out of the Ethereum ecosystem. And Ethereum native tokens and networks like Scale actually add value back to Ethereum. They help Ethereum keep capturing value while, it's almost like there's still a toll being paid to Ethereum, going back to the highway analogy. And other people are like, hey, you just come entirely over to this separate highway. Don't ever pay a toll to the other one. And, don't worry about it. Just come here. But you can use the same type of car.
Right.
And, and the reality is Ethereum developers do care about the success of Ethereum and the value of ETH and the value capture of the network. And so it ends up working really well for Scale.
Yeah. I like that way of thinking about it. Do you think, will developers or do developers currently build on Scale, or they would build apps on Ethereum and then use Scale as the network for their users? How do you describe the development?
Yeah, I mean, there are over 100 applications that are building and testing on Scale that are Ethereum applications, right? So they build something on Ethereum, they say, okay, I'm going to go connect it to Scale and make it really fast. They can also just build it on Scale entirely separately, but it's the same thing. If it works on Ethereum, it works on Scale. If it works on Scale, it works on Ethereum. But it all depends on the user flow.
Right.
For the end user.
What do you think about Ethereum's, say, like medium 5 to longer 10 plus year roadmap? Do you see them as keep doing what they're doing, keep providing core infrastructural value, and just optimizing on efficiency, trying to get the gas prices lower? Or is there some big thing that the Ethereum Foundation and community is trying to achieve other than that?
You know what? The main focus now is to make Ethereum more layer 2 friendly.
Yeah.
And so you can think of these other lanes like Scale being this layer 2, this second layer connected to Ethereum, which, by the way, there's a lot of nitpickiness around what exactly is a layer 2, what isn't. And it's a pretty broad term, so I think it's safe to use. Some people would say Scale is a scaling layer, not a layer 2. And it's like, okay, poor taxonomy there.
Yeah.
But that being said, whether it's in a scaling layer or a layer 2 for Ethereum, the focus for Ethereum is being the foundation, right? This settlement layer, this place of security that's utilized just for really expensive transactions. And then layer 2 is where you need all the high speed, low cost transactions. But the layer 2 is solidified and emboldened by the layer 1, by the foundation of Ethereum. So there's a lot of growth Ethereum can keep making to make itself more and more layer 2 friendly. And that's where the focus has been. So the whole ETH2 project of it, making Ethereum individually a, 10,000 transaction per second machine, that really died. And it's all turned into making Ethereum, a better access point for other scaling solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to make sense. It's awesome that you're working on this. What was the? I know you met your co-founder, and around the same time, you guys were thinking about a similar type of applications. But yeah, I'd love to hear what was the moment that it clicked for you, that you said this is precisely the product direction we want to go down. Was it modeling after other projects out there, or was it? It must have been to some extent, right? I'm curious what the early days were like.
Yeah. And which speaking of which, for the people listening or watching today, like, it's kind of funny. Mike and I realized we knew each other from like over a decade ago. Just
yeah.
Entrepreneur friends. We're like, well, we're Facebook friends. We met each other. I mean, probably well over a decade, but yeah, in my prior life, I was, enterprise software entrepreneur, doing machine learning, AI stuff, and had built, some really successful companies in that space. And I had been going down the crypto rabbit hole as, an enthusiast since 2013. And I was getting ready to start another company in 2017 and just decided I wanted to do it in blockchain and Web3. And I was just captured by the ability to create different types of businesses. So it was like, it was just amazing to me to think you could create a DAO and create these like kind of cooperatively owned structures that were businesses. A co-op didn't have to just be a grocery store. It could be a bank. It could be, a social media platform, a life science product, a B2B product. And so I actually was trying to build an application and kept running into all the scaling issues for Ethereum. And, and actually was introduced to my co-founder, Stan Kladko, who he's got a PhD in physics from Max Planck. He was a world-renowned physics researcher at Stanford, and then became a world-renowned cryptographer back in late 90s, early 2000s. And Stan was also trying to build something. And Stan, so we actually weren't trying to build middleware or like a scaling platform. We were just trying to build applications. And Stan actually said, "Oh, well, when I met him, he said, I'm gonna do these 4 different applications." I was like, "Stan, I don't know if you should make 4 businesses. That sounds like." And I said, "Why do you think you could do these?" And he said, "Oh, well, look at this is what I've envisioned in terms of this technology to scale these." And then and I said, "Well, this seems like a phenomenal product in itself." And then he and I really just like hashed out. We said, "Hey, we don't need to just build this for our own applications. We can build this and bring this to other people like us." And really it was, a lot of good businesses come from you trying to solve your own problem. And as an entrepreneur, a lot of, if anyone listening probably has empathy for this, it's like really tough to come up with a business idea. And, the best ones come when you're actually doing something for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that was the genesis of Skale back in 2017. That's when we started. We raised about 30 million of financing, starting in 2018, and the network went live on October 1st of last year. And there's over $1 billion roughly staked in the network. So pretty exciting to see the growth. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me down this path from being a B2B entrepreneur to building Web3 infrastructure.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's almost exactly how I would think someone building this type of tool or protocol comes across it, because it's really hard to know the timing and the specific use cases unless you're experiencing the problem yourself, and crypto in particular, because it's like, the advice in startups is that timing matters so much. So solve a problem that you're experiencing as a good rule of thumb, as opposed to trying to find a problem for your solution. And you can't come across this. You can't know that it's good timing to build this kind of protocol unless you're experiencing the problem firsthand, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And what did you think about the early days of developing the tokenomics? Was it difficult to figure out how you wanted to construct the model? Because certainly back then the road wasn't as paved as it is today. You have to decide how much to keep for yourself. You have the private company. I'm curious how you thought about structuring that, and if there were other options that were on the table at the time.
Yeah, it was, just like Wild West back in 2017. There weren't really good mechanisms. And the funny thing, and everyone was kind of doing it differently. but then you'd have these people that would come to you and be like, oh, we're a advisory group, and we're going to help you launch your token, and we're going to build all the token economics. We've got these people, and they all try to charge you like 5% of the total tokens or something. And I think anybody who used one of those services probably died, because if you're giving some kind of like shill team who doesn't really even know anything about token economics 5% of your token float, that's just a really poor use of tokens. So what we did, I realized too, it's like, okay, all these people are pitching us. So I just turned into like, an interview where I was like, well, what do you think's a good idea? Who does good token economics? And I studied, all these different structures. And, hey, Skale is decentralized. It's not, a founder like myself has to come up with the plan, but you need to kind of get that plan bought in and like, edited and massaged by a lot of other people who will be playing a role in the network. And so, I think we had a good starting point, and then we were able to just do a really good job capturing feedback and getting like, open source, it was almost like open sourcing the economics. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of feedback from other people, and ultimately I think created a really good plan. And what we did too, we were incredibly conservative in terms of vesting schedules and on both team and investors, or I guess early supporters. A lot of projects as soon as they get started, their tokens start vesting, and they have huge chunks of tokens. Then the token finally goes liquid, and it might go liquid 2 or 3 years later, and the team has all these liquid tokens, and people just start dumping the asset. And these assets are not securities, right? They're actually utilities that are utilized in the network. But when you have people that are just treating them like some share and just like, stock, and just going and trading them and dumping them immediately, it kills your ability to create real utility. Mm. And so for us, we made it so everybody on the core team had a 4-year vesting schedule that didn't even commence until the first day the network was fully live in a decentralized manner. And so that means, I've been working on this now for 4 years, and the first day I vested was October 1st of last year. And so I think we did things like that helped build a lot of trust. We also have investors that also, their schedules didn't start till the network was live. And I guess they're not technically investors because they were buying tokens, utility tokens, and using them in the network. So we'll call them supporters. But, these VC firms had, really good structures too, to make sure that the utility of the network could be leveraged.
Yeah. I guess no one is fully vested at this point, because you, I imagine, would have been the earliest one in. Do you think that worked? I mean, it works as far as...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, dramatic. I mean, if we didn't do that, we would have had a team that was like, I would be 3/4 vested already.
Yeah.
And same with all these other people. And that's, incentives drive behavior, and you need to have people, who have a lot of upside, who've been working on these projects, to have long schedules where they're vesting.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about Skale also is that you can stake it. So a lot of people everybody on the core team is, no one's selling. People are just keeping their tokens staked in the network. And then every month they're getting liquid tokens. And the same thing with people who are purchasing tokens, or like purchase them early, these early supporters. It's almost like people don't want to kill their cash cow, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't want to kill the golden goose that's laying the eggs. And so there's just an incentive and these tokens have a utility. So they actually work as a staking vehicle in the network. And so then if there's a malicious actor, there's actually a slashing condition. So your tokens are being put in the network as they're basically being put at risk, to guarantee to developers that, the ledger will remain accurate. Mm. And that's how blockchains work, right? Bitcoin is a proof of work chain. So there's all this energy expenditure that ensures that people are going to be accurate. Same thing with Ethereum, but proof of stake networks require, instead of energy, they require essentially like money or tokens to be put as collateral. Mm-hmm. And that's, the use of Skale. And then you also get paid in those tokens by way of, offering up your asset as collateral.
Yeah. It's interesting how those two models emerged, In hindsight 2020, it's like proof of stake and proof of work seem obvious, but what you're effectively doing is trading your time and your attention time, I think of time as lost opportunity with currencies. So if I stake something,
Yeah.
and then energy being the actual work to run whatever mining is being done. Do you think is there another mechanism? I guess consensus are there other mechanisms that you've seen?
Yeah. So that's right. So consensus is the mechanism for the computers to kind of come to agreement. But then as part of that consensus mechanism, then there's an element of, okay, what am I putting here? Like, what am I bringing to the table that lets me participate? And proof of stake is obviously using, collateral, which is, dramatically more energy friendly, right? It's more green, it's clean, it's, good for the environment dramatically compared to proof of work. Mm-hmm. Then there's other techniques people are trying, like proof of space, like you have to put, a certain amount of compute space up. But to me, proof of stake is just the absolute best way to do it because, people, you're just collateralizing, at the end of the day, like I mentioned that game of, or like telegram or telephone, right? So let's say everybody has to whisper to each other a phrase and whatever 7 of the 10 people say will be the phrase. Somebody could like change it and like, and if enough people, 7 of the 10 are all saying the wrong thing, well, then that's the truth. But imagine if you didn't say what if you were the one person saying the wrong thing and you lost $1,000 and you'd be really sure to like make sure you'd said the right thing, right?
Yeah, totally.
And really the cool thing about blockchains is they're just coordination vehicles for people. Mm-hmm. They're not magical things that produce like accurate results. Mm. They are just a way for someone to look at something and say, here's a set, this data is accurate. Like the ledger, like Bitcoin is like, you can create money with these things and say, you have this many, I have this many. And, it's one function of a blockchain. You can also run smart contracts and, process computation and, take in Oracle inputs, but they're all really just a matter of like letting people all, without one person being in control or one group, they let a group of people, coordinate and organize.
Yeah. It's a thing of beauty. And it's awesome that it's happening right now in the world. The timing is, divine. I'm curious in the beginning. So you mentioned the vesting schedule. You go out initially, you go to, I imagine, crypto-focused VC funds, maybe wealthy angels, and they commit to buying the tokens on a pre-sale. So they're giving you cash deposited in your bank, and the promise is we're going to issue you these tokens when the network goes live. Is there, I guess, what other major decisions did you need to make? How many tokens to mint, the schedule that the mechanics of how the staking to the minting of new tokens is conceived? Were there other kind of like mind benders where you're sitting there and you're like, man, I just don't know which direction to go, or there were really hard decisions?
Oh yeah, it took us 18 months to build the token economic model, and this model includes price for chains. So if you're going to rent a chain from the network, that's how Scale works. There's no transaction fees for the end user. So let's say you want a blockchain and you're launching an NFT project. Well, you have to then pay in Scale tokens, and you buy a year in advance for the chain. And what happens is you actually you take a certain amount of tokens, you stake them in the network, and every month 1/12 of that goes to this pool and it pays out all the people staking. There's also an inflationary mechanism. So every month there's a certain amount of inflation and it pays out the people staking. And there's this curve where every year the amount of inflation goes down with hopes that the fees go up, right? And at some point, the inflation will be really, really small and the fees will be really, really high if the network is successful. And so then there's a thing of like, well, if the token price goes up a lot, how do you make sure that it's still affordable? Otherwise, you've just kind of, taken this Ethereum model where it's really expensive to use a product, but, and then Scale will be equally expensive. So there's actually an elastic price curve, and it's like a surge price. So based off the amount of nodes in the network and the amount of chains, so there's a number, like what's the capacity of chains in the network, and how many of them are actually active right now, and how many nodes are open. That gives you your supply rating. That's your like your load score.
Capacity.
Your load score. So if your capacity, if the network's like at 70% capacity, it is nonlinear. It is like 50 times as expensive as if the network were at 30% capacity. What that does is it incentivizes more people to set up more servers, which then lowers the capacity score, which then makes the price go down. And so let's say that there's all this excess capacity and the inflation is not, doing the job. Well, people are going to quit running the servers. And then the load goes back up. And so the economics are designed to try to keep the network at 50% load. And it's really cheap to rent a chain if the network's underloaded. It's really expensive to do it if it's overloaded. So you have to figure out that component, how many tokens exist for those mechanisms. You have to figure out, okay, what does the core team have and what's that vesting schedule? What do the early supporters have and what's their vesting schedule? And by the way they purchase, they do it through, most people use these thing called SAFs. And so they're actually securities. You have to be a registered investor and, do KYC AML, and you're actually buying a security because the token doesn't exist yet. But then there's a point where the token transitions from a security to a utility. And there's a lot of legal nuance, and the SEC's put out a lot of, I think, good guidance and framework on how to do that, to ensure that there's decentralization, that this product actually exists. If it's the Howey test, if there's a hammer, if you're out selling hammers and people are trading hammers, well, they better exist, right? So there's a lot of stuff you have to do. We did this really compliant launch with Consensus, which I could talk about later, but. Yeah, so all these factors are integrated, and there's also the what is each node in the network? What is the minimum requirement of tokens, right? And so that number actually impacts the ROI for validators running nodes. And if that number is too low, well, it costs an exorbitant amount of money and operational costs to run servers.
Yeah. If
that number is too high, well, you really limit the quantity of nodes in the network, and you make the network more centralized. And so there's all these trade-offs, and we had a PhD, economics PhD, work on it and did a project. We had Delphi Digital do like a 3-month really deep token economics consulting project. We had, I think, 3 different people on our team, myself and 2 people who are like really amazing financial modelers with management consulting experience and backgrounds, work on this thing. And then we had to open source it and get all the feedback from all the different, parties, dApp developers, validators, early supporters and, potential delegators. And you do all that, and then it gets baked into Solidity. You have to take all that model, turn it into Ethereum virtual machine language. And then without a single person being involved, it charges people, pays people, penalizes people. And literally the blockchain is doing all of that logic, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. God, it's wild. It's almost like the way you're describing it to me, I'm sure just like you listen to a lot of founders and you understand a lot of businesses, and then you get into the world of crypto and token economics and tokenomics. And it's more like, instead of building a machine, which is typically the way I think of a startup, there's an acquisition and you pour gas on the fire to get more in, and you provide value and you extract value, and there's a percentage ownership of that. This is almost like an organism, because everything is a feedback loop. So it's just endless feedback loops. There's no customer acquisition. There's no product being sold. It just exists as it is. And the thing has to self-regulate itself. And so you're designing. I mean, was there a certain point where you're just putting a finger up in the air and saying, well, we're just going to go with this number for the elasticity curve index, or
we had to model. So we started that way, and then we said, you know what, this is stupid. We were like, okay, we just put it, and then we're like, no, this is actually part of the product. So you think about product management and there's technology design. There's a lot of economics design that are literally a piece of the product. And so what we did is we actually built through these models so you could change all these levers in this Excel sheet that then would kick out different outputs. And then and Delphi did a really good job with this. And they put these things. So we had these, like, we knew if something broke, if it was too high or too low, or if the tokens disappeared. And so we could just have this dashboard and say, okay, well, what if that, like, token price is at this, and the utility is this, and the number of nodes is this. Boom. What is this? What does the model say? Like, does the network is it still in this, like, healthy zone? And we're able to just do that over and over and over, and then finally say, okay, this is the best we can do. And what we realized, we're like, you look at the price of Ethereum, we realized that, and hey, it was absolute brilliance to build Ethereum and get everything to where it was. But the level of sophistication, like, we were standing on the shoulders of giants, and we're able to learn from people before us. But I'm sure that they didn't go through that level of rigor in the economics model.
Yeah.
And now it's really difficult to change anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's,
do you feel like, are there things now, if you're so much closer to this than I am, if you're looking at the Ethereum economics model, do you feel that there's any, feeling of, hey, I wish we had done this different? I mean, you benefit from the fact that Ethereum came before, and Ethereum is an awesome project. But given where we are today in 2021, do you feel like there's things that Ethereum Foundation founders largely would have done different? I know it's hard to say because who knows, but
yeah,
or it's just kind of
well, you see, these new proposals are coming forward, and I think you're seeing a lot of, of how payments work and how gas fees are handled, and how so there's a lot of things that they're trying to change, and like we in the Ethereum community are all collectively trying to improve, but it is these things are hard because it's such a game theoretical thing that if you try to fix one thing, it may open a loophole for someone else to exploit value.
Yeah.
Or you do something and then it just, but one of the I think the issues is that there's such a desire to ensure that anybody could run a node for decentralization. But the reality is these, mining pools, and in the future staking pools, are so dominated by, finite, like, small groups, large groups, but a small number of those groups, that it ends up being pretty centralized anyways.
Yeah.
There's
right.
It's mining pools that could just stop Ethereum any day. But, and it's, so I actually think if they were to increase the hardware capacity and the hardware requirements, you could get a lot more done on Ethereum. But then it creates centralization. But I actually think the centralization is already there. Yeah,
it's hard to see. I mean, if you almost take a step back and from the fact of Ethereum and the labels of these products, I think if you just take individual, whether it's people or machines, and you say we have some work to do in the network to reconcile who has what. Just take the case of money. So how much money is in each wallet? Well, who keeps track of that? And say there's 1,000 people that each have wallets, and we all want to know how much does each person have, the ledger. And if I'm not keeping track, if I have the wallet but I'm not keeping track, well, then I'm one vote for centralization. Unless you have every person who uses a wallet that actually maintains the ledger, then there's going to be some degree of centralization, right? It's not, like you said, a limited number. It may be a couple hundred, but it's still not everyone in the network. And it seems like it has to be this way. It can't ever be completely decentralized where every person keeps a record. It's just wasted energy, unnecessary. But also, it can't just be one, like a bank, because then that has its own vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the majority of the really successful proof of stake networks that have launched in the last year, they strike a pretty good balance of being optimized for performance and being decentralized. And the good thing is, like, this whole validator market has made that really come together. So now there's like 30 validators probably that run 90% of proof of stake networks.
Wow.
In terms of, and then maybe there's like 30 more behind them that run the next 5%. And then, so it's actually, but these are really sophisticated businesses, and most of them will never run more than 20% of any network. And most of them at most run maybe like 5% of a network. and then you've got 30 or 20 of them on each one of these networks. And Scale's got 48 validator orgs run by, I think, 30 different entities. And, hey, it's not, now there's 4,000 people, or one time there's 4,000 people from 90 countries staking. But the people that run the servers are the ones who could be malicious. But hey, if you look at them, these same people that run these servers run, all the other major proof of stake networks. So they're not going to steal from Scale, because anybody staking with them on Solana and Near and Avalanche and ETH2 will quit doing business with them if they're malicious, right? So there ends up being this like pooled security component too across the whole validator network. But validator businesses, I think, really open up the opportunity for like having good performance and decentralization. And I think I'm comfortable with those trade-offs. It's not like this, ideal state of decentralization, but the tech's not there. Maybe in 20 years we'll be there where everybody in their home can have a little computer that, plays a role in 50 different blockchains, but, and you have incredible performance, but we're not there.
And I don't even think that makes sense, because there's always going to be consolidation, power and consolidation. So just by having an individual computer, it's like, what about the rooms with the cooling and, all the efficiencies of that? It seems like like you said, a necessary evil isn't even the right word, a necessary structure to how we do it. The scary part would be if there's consolidation. If somebody said, hey, I'm going to go out and raise a couple $1 billion and I'm going to buy all the mining networks, and it's all under one company with one guy sitting on his throne, and, but
happening with mining. So if you look at these huge, mining entities in Asia and, in different parts of the US, Canada, there's dramatic centralization happening at the proof of work level. And it's all under the guise of mining pools. So there might be a bunch of little operators connecting into these pools, but they don't make any money. The people that make the money are the people that have like really amazing energy efficiencies, like through contracts, and really expensive hardware. In proof of stake, the good thing is these big, so Blockdaemon, which is one of Scale's largest validators, just raised a massive funding round, and you look at Bison Trails was just acquired by Coinbase, and you look at Staked and Figment and Chorus One. There's all of these world-class validators that are making a lot of money, but they all recognize that their value is in not being too big. If they end up acquiring one another, they end up ever running too much of any network, the networks that they run become brittle. And so they know they need each other. And so it actually creates, so it almost, instead of having a monopoly, it creates this this karetsu thing where these people are, okay, like we'll play friendly together. And when you're on a network, pull me in, and you're on a network, and they end up having these like alliances, even though they're competitors. It's really interesting.
Do you feel like there's enough attention paid in the communities to the ownership of these companies? I mean, they couldn't quietly consolidate and then do shit from there.
You know what? It's Stan. We had a big AMA yesterday, and Stan, my co-founder, he had a good quote where he said, like, decentralization is a problem for the future. And, not many people at Scale, we really care about decentralization and some other, there's a lot of really good technical projects that care about decentralization, but end users don't care about it now, and investors don't seem to care. And but in the future, when things are centralized and you have issues and people lose money, or networks get brittle, or some governmental entity can come in and just shut the government can't shut down Bitcoin, right? And it's not that the goal of all blockchain and Web3 products are to beat the government. It's just to put power in the hands of people and users and workers. And at least in my opinion. But I think, someday not enough people are worrying about it now, but it will be, I think, a really hot topic in the future.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, but it does make a lot of sense. So what's your,
By the way, that one other thing that just for anybody knowing what goes into launching a network, one of the craziest and hardest things was we had all these people on the team, the core team, all these early supporters, all these VC funds that had bought SAFs, and we could have just completely played zero role in connecting anybody to validators. We had, I think 30 some validators, right, that were all, testing, getting ready to launch. But we had to, without playing any sort of centralized role, try to like match make people in a way that the network would be decentralized. Because if you don't, everybody might just use the same one or two validators, and then you don't have any sort of like good distribution. So it was an incredible game of cat herding.
What did that look like practically? I mean, are you sending email intros to people, or are you?
Yeah, we're just email introing people, and like, and all the validators are really, they're the people that run the network. They're big owners of the network and partners, and so you want to make sure all of them are successful. But one day you're like, hey, you should talk to these ones. They're the best. Next day, hey, you should talk to these ones. They're the best. And so you try to match people. What we did, we just said, hey, let's try to give each one of them 3 or 4 intros. And as a core team, we can't be doing too much, orchestration or centralized control. Let's just try to facilitate like this pollination as good as possible. And then it ended up being like, you can see it on stakingrewards.com. It ended up being, it's an incredibly decentralized network, but it wasn't without like a lot of effort from, there's some people on the solutions engineering team and BD team at Skale that put many, many hours into that.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that a little more. So you have about 30 when you launch, 30 validators. Did they all find you, and did you have to interview them or have somehow validate the validators, or and what exactly are they doing too? Yeah.
Yeah, and so part of requirement of decentralization is you do need to have like, you can't just say, hey, you 5 people are going to run the network and we're going to only let you do it. So we actually had to, like, in a collaborative, open manner, run a, like, just like in this, like, every week there was this kind of group meeting, and every month there was like this kind of steering committee meeting, and the validators kind of came up with rules. And then the validators that, there were probably 200 validators that wanted to run the initial set, but the ones that were able to run it all put in a ton of time and effort into test nets, and they helped get the network from like, running internally on some like AWS servers testing to like being a truly decentralized effort. And so one, they did a lot of work there. 2, it depends on there is an open market component. So they had to go pitch all these people. They had to go talk to Multicoin and Floodgate and Signia and NGC and Winklevoss Capital and all, these supporters of Skale, and go talk to Galaxy and Hashed and try to pitch, right? And so some of them just had really good relationships already, and they were able to go into like people who they already worked with and like win those deals.
Can I ask you to explain that a little more? So validators pitching your investors to win deal. What are they pitching, and what deals?
Yeah, for delegation. So let's say you've got like $50 million worth of Skale tokens. These validator companies are coming to you saying, please stake into my nodes. I'm going to run Skale nodes. I'm really good. You can trust me. I won't get slashed. Will be a good actor. And then they negotiate a cut. So the validators might say, I get 10% of your staking rewards every month, or 15%. Right? Or 7%. And some of them try to take like a really low amount and then grow over time. Some people are just like, no, we do quality. We're the most expensive. We take 18%, but we're the best. Right? And so there's all these like sub markets happening within these marketplaces. And it's like really cool to see. But it also means there's a huge network upgrade happening today on Skale. And it required all these different people to like sign this multi-sig to approve the contract upgrades. It requires, these like 48 different orgs updating their servers. They have to do it in like this coordinated manner so that the current servers don't go down. Because if the current servers and dApps lose, if like greater than 2/3 or greater than 1/3 are not live, the network, their chain loses liveliness. So there's just all this stuff that happens, and there's 50 companies all working together to make a network function. And then there's 50 other companies that are financially staked in and like getting return and negotiating with the people that run the servers. It's a pretty cool system.
Yeah. And I imagine a lot of this just kind of it just kind of came to fruition. You can't anticipate the sub markets to some extent. There's going to be validators, but then they go around and pitch investors on different propositions, and they compete in their own sub market. Help me understand a little bit more about these validators. Are they individuals, or are they usually companies that have computational power and engineers on staff?
Yeah, they're almost all companies. And now these companies, a lot of them have venture funding. A lot of them are smaller companies that try to be small intentionally. Like Chainflow is a really good example where they really believe in validator decentralization. And then you have some like really big ones like Blockdaemon that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and like Figment and they run all over, every proof of stake network. You've got some of these big ones on almost every single one, every major one. And yeah, these are all venture-backed, high-growth businesses that are making a ton of money right now, and they're really like DevOps teams. They're like security and DevOps, and they run servers, they do test nets, they do upgrades, and just phenomenal teams. And people have asked me, hey, what token should I follow? And it's like, look at the best validators and see what networks they run. That's my advice.
Yes, continue. Go where? I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, so if you go to the Skale website, you can see all the validators running Skale, and go look at, find a logo, and then go to their website, and, go to Blockdaemon's website and see what, go to Staked or Figment or Chorus One and see what networks they run. And they are all of these new proof of stake networks want the best validators running their servers, because that's how you bring security to your application partners.
Yeah.
But they have very limited time, and and their teams are really strapped, so it's tough to get them to run in your network. So it's I think it's a good way for people to find good projects is to follow them, because they know the most about the tech and the money and the token economics, and they in a way they're investors that invest their time and effort to get return as opposed to early stage capital.
Yeah, that's a good pro tip right there. Hey, I know you had to run it too. Do you have a couple more minutes, or do you have to jump?
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what's the challenge? Like, Jack's sitting down tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's Saturday, so you sit down on Monday. What do you typically run into as far as how you spend your day and the problems? Is it personnel? Is it, hey, we got to hire this person to do this? Or is it designing programs? I know you have the accelerator, you have the company that sits separate to the protocol.
Yep.
Yeah. What's top of mind for you?
Yeah. What I would I think the interesting thing about working in like Web3 infrastructure, working on a proof of stake network, is there's like 5 businesses in one.
Yeah.
So launching the network, I mean, and you think about this, it's not like a normal company. You try to find product market fit, you build a product, you go sell it, you just use Amazon or Google Cloud to run the servers. At Skale, like there's just all these different components and parts of this machinery. 2, you actually aren't in control of anybody. All you can do is influence them. You do have people that work for the core team that do a lot of, that it's like a normal business, but there's just so many businesses in one. And so the hard part is just, and some people are like, hey, how come you haven't been doing this, or this? And it's like, well, we also have a team of, 35 people that, that are like managing and hiring, and, so you have all the normal things. So it's a matter of prioritization is the hardest part. And I mean, I'm just really thankful this isn't my first company.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really tough if you hadn't started a company before, because anybody listening who started one or thinking about starting one, one of the main lessons, right, you learn during your first venture is just how to manage time. And, you can, there's 50 things you can do every day, but what are the 5 things you should do first, and try to make sure you finish. And so that's all but hey, we're at a really, for Skale, we're at this point now where today marks this network upgrade that we've got 20 dApps getting ready to go live based off this this upgrade, 20 new ones coming on board. It opens up some new features. It opens up this optimized bridging to Ethereum. And so for me now, I'm kind of like breathing a sigh of relief, like, okay, good. Now we're going to this next stage. And, and really it's all 2022 is just about scaling. We're going to scale.
Yeah, I like that. Do you follow other projects closely, or are you mostly thinking scale all day and don't bother?
You know what, I do, and I have a lot of like good friends that are founders of other projects or work at other projects, and a lot of and it's so I try to follow the market the best I can, but at the same time I'm spending like every waking minute that I'm not with my family, working on Scale. So I just can't follow as well as I used to, but I try to keep track of the main things happening, because there's so much learning right now, right? And it's like, why make a mistake when you can learn from someone else's mistake, or someone else did something that worked? Well, hey, maybe you should do that. So we actually even have people on our team assigned to do research on other projects. To say, like, okay, how did they launch their DeFi arm, or how did they launch this NFT component? Like, what did they do? What type of grants did their foundation give out? What sort of, like things did they do in testnet? So we do a lot of research, and then have people bring that back to other people in a synthesized manner.
Do they put that out into the world, publish it?
We haven't yet, but we haven't, because we're talking about other projects and saying, here's what they did good, here's what they did bad. Wow, that was dumb. Like, dude,
you should push that out.
So,
you could say,
maybe we should
criticize people respectfully.
Yeah, I just don't want to have people feel like we're trying to be, give negative critique. But yeah, there's a lot of learning lessons, and it's a new type of way of doing business, right? It's like you raise a bunch of money, you give it away to a foundation, who then that's a nonprofit. You create a bunch of really amazing code with all this money and get a lot of people contributing. Then you just open source it and you let anybody in the world have it, right? You have a product, you don't even run it. Other people have to run it. It's just, it's a completely different way of doing business than being at a centralized company. And so there's frankly just a lot of learning happening across the board.
Yeah, it's wild. I love it, man. I love it. I love you're diving into this, and you've made such great progress with such an awesome team. I know you got to run, so I want to be respectful of your time. Any last thoughts you want to throw out there? Anything you guys are looking for?
Well, no, feel free to follow me on Twitter, Jack O'Halloran at Jack O'Halloran. You can go to Skale Network, which is skale.network, and find all the social links. And if you're interested in building, go to scale.chat, and you can join the Discord, and that's our kind of dApp developer hub. But no, Mike, it was fun catching up, man, and really good to see you after 10 plus years, whatever it's been. And good luck with the move. I hate moving, so my empathy, I have empathy for you, but
it's a good one. All right, man, good chatting with you. Best of luck, and keep kicking ass. All right.